their communities, and their lives. The partnership has a website, njdams.org. This presentation and all of the past presentations, which I think were over a dozen now, can all be found on njdams.org, as well as a lot of other information, frequently asked questions, and information I think that would be useful to everyone from the very early learner in dam removal to people who are a little bit more advanced, including a lot of recent information on monitoring, how to plan to monitor and carry out monitoring for your dam removal project. I'll remind everyone to mute, and I'll say give a special shout out to those joining on phones to mute, because that seems to be the folks who forget to mute most often. If you have questions, you can go ahead and put them in the chat. We're going to hold all questions until the end of the presentation. So I will just welcome folks again. I see we've had another jump since my first welcome, but I'll begin, and then I have a few things to say, and then I'll turn it over to our three speakers for today. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay, it's probably going to switch again now. Okay, so I think we are all very well aware that the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act was signed at the end of last year, and that this act contains, a plethora of things, but also a bunch of stuff that will provide funding for dam safety programs in general. But this presentation will focus on funding available for dam removal, specifically via those federal programs. We will see this funding come down to us through our federal partners. Altogether, there's about $800 million, and I'll remind folks that there are other related programs, so that if you are doing a dam removal adjacent to 25 acres of restoration, you might want to avail yourself of additional information besides what we'll discuss today. But the partners that you'll hear from today are probably a good starting point for other help you might need in looking for funding from this new law. Okay, so that $800 million is coming from a variety of different places. NOAA, who we will hear from, and US Fish and Wildlife, who we'll hear from. You see the breakdown of the dollars here. FEMA, we don't have someone from FEMA on, but as programs get developed, we might do that a little bit later on. The Army Corps will give an outline, and US Forest Service, also not on the call, will have funding available. One thing that I'd like to make clear before our speakers begin is that none of these speakers, at least to my most recent knowledge, have a fully packaged program ready to roll out. You might ask, well, then why do this presentation now? And the answer to that is we will all need to think about projects that fit in under these programs, partners that we need to put together, project teams, maybe even start to think in general terms about your budget. So it kind of seemed better to give folks a general idea of what kind of programs are out there as you go forward. I think waiting until you see a packaged RFP to start to think about your project is kind of too late, because the typical turnaround for an RFP of 90 days, maybe 120 days is kind of short notice to think about such a big project. So I am going to stop sharing.
I hear what you're saying.
I'm assuming that that person doesn't mean you can't hear what I'm saying. Okay. Hey, Michelle, can you make sure that the recorder is on? Okay. So I will first introduce Carl Alderson from the NOAA Restoration Center, Office of Habitat Conservation, and he'll talk to us about some of the NOAA programs. And again, these are development, but Carl can tell you more about that.
Okay, now I've unmuted. Thanks. When in doubt, hit the unmute button twice. All right, and Beth, I may have also just unmuted everyone, so just letting you know. All right, so hi, nice to be here today with you all to talk about this windfall of money we call the infrastructure bill. As Beth said, there's great news that there is this wonderful bounty of funds for fish passage and habitat restoration and resilience in general. I'll go through with you what it is that NOAA is going to be providing from the infrastructure bill. And that's the good news. The bad news is I do not have for you any very detailed or specific information about how that'll be parsed out. At this point, we're still waiting for Congress to approve spend plans. There seems to be a delay. That delay is, comes with a great deal of uncertainty. Will we be able to release our first national competitive grant opportunity in May, June, July, August? How about the possibility that all of this will be stalled until the next fiscal year, beginning October? So let me put that right out to you.
I don't know if you realize that you're not sharing slides.
I'm not sharing yet because this is my opening introductory caveat to the entirety of the presentation. Yeah. No, I just want to hit you with those two things. One is a bit of a bomb, the fact that the money has not been released yet. And the other, just the good news we all know, that in fact, it will be coming, but we don't know when. So let me share screen now and we'll get right to it. Okay. What you're seeing right now is the NOAA's official authorized PowerPoint that any one of my colleagues or I is able to share with you today. But at the end, I'm going to give you a little hint about how this might play out, but it's not in the official presentation. All right. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, of course, was signed into law in 2021. And it does provide $3 billion, 3 with a B, for NOAA over 5 years with a significant amount for dam removal, but also other types of habitat restoration in the marine environment, marine and riverine coastal environments, right? Marine, estuarine, and in fact, riverine, because our trust resources, that being anadromous species in this case, do make their way into riverine environments. So here's where NOAA gets up into freshwater systems. It's unprecedented. Why? Because we haven't seen this kind of infusion in money and this kind of investment in habitat restoration since the Recovery Act of 2009. And if you all recall, we did tremendous things with that fund, including a project right here in New Jersey in the Hackensack River at Lincoln Park, which is a major park of Hudson County, county-run park, where we converted the 90-acre former municipal dump into a 42-acre complex of wetlands and transitional uplands, 1.5 miles of trails, and interpretive signs, plus a 9-hole public golf course to complete the package, with about $10.6 million worth of Recovery Act funds, plus an infusion from natural resource damage funds, and for a a full $17 million investment. So that's the kind of project that our NOAA administrator and my office in particular, the Office of Habitat Conservation rather, Restoration Center, is likely to be able to perform. We're talking about big ideas, big projects. Unprecedented because it is now in the billions rather than millions. So here's how it breaks down. We've got $891 million to spend over 5 years, just for the Office of Habitat Conservation. That's not including all the other offices that make up NOAA. That's not the Weather Service, not the National Ocean Service, that's just within the national, that's within fisheries, right? Just fisheries. So how's that break down? $491 million for general habitat restoration and resilience. And as Beth pointed out at the beginning, $400 million over 5 years just for fish passage, with 15% reserved for federally recognized tribes. Do the math, take away 15%, that's just for tribes, and you have a remainder that's going to be a part of a national competitive grant announced as a notice of funding, or a NOFO, if you will, in federal parlance, at some point, hopefully this year. I want to talk about the other component too, because I don't want to just limit myself today to dam removal, because there are other opportunities for all of you folks throughout the state. $491 million over 5 years to restore marine, estuarine, coastal, or Great Lakes ecosystems. So, using approaches that enhance community resilience to climate hazards. So, what does that mean? That means that when you apply to this competitive grant, you will be thinking, what can I do to advance and promote habitat restoration? That could be salt marshes, oyster beds, eelgrass beds. That could be, hydrologic improvements like culvert removals or culvert replacements and enhancements, just to reconnect poorly connected stream corridors. That could be riparian buffer zones. That could be, included with salt marshes. That could be scrub, shrub transitional zones. It could be beach and dune, right? It could be anything that has a component that is both going to create a resilient habitat and a more resilient human community. I like to separate those two things out. I like to be able to point to the fact that habitat restoration involves a great deal of making them resilient, right? At least long lasting, enduring, sustaining, if you will. In addition to what we can achieve to make human communities more sustainable. So when you think about the techniques there, you think about living shorelines, revetments that are living revetments like oyster reefs, or it could be beach and dune enhancements. Now you think, well, the Army Corps does that on the Jersey Shore, but there's also the Bay Shore, Raritan Bay. There's the interior. What can we do to fortify communities, make them more resilient, and include some component of habitat in our Back Bay areas? That's about that part. Okay, so let's go to the part you came for today, specifically fish passage, right? That's 400 million, excuse me. It's competitive, it's national. It's going to be one offering per year, one national competitive grant offering per year for 5 years, with 15% reserved, separated out, and designated for federally recognized tribes. Now, if you are here today and a member of a federally recognized tribe within New Jersey, this is an opportunity like we've not seen before in at least my 20-year history working with competitive grants at NOAA. And that's about what I can officially tell you about those two offerings. Here are the other offerings. This might not be germane to you, but if you have ties to the Pacific Coast, there is the $172 million Pacific Coast Salmon Recovery Fund. The second one you're going to be familiar with, if you're familiar with the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, NIFWF. The second one, $492 million over 5 years, goes to the NIFWF, or as I said, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, NCRF grant program. You may be a person or an organization that's already applied to them over the past 3+ years. This is a major infusion of funding to continue that program. So you may very well want to check in with them if you're looking for that. Just Google in NIFWF, or as I said, National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, if you don't like the the acronym pronunciation, and NCRF grant program, and you'll see what they've got up their sleeves there. So the money travels from NOAA to the nonprofit, and then hopefully to you. The next bullet, Habitat Restoration Coastal Zone Management Program, $207 million over 5 years. The CZM program divided between all the coastal states, right? So New Jersey gets a piece of that pie. And then that number 492 is very popular. The National Estuarine Research Reserves over the entire nation will split $492 million. So that's your NEARS program in New Jersey, the Jacques Cousteau National Estuarine Research Reserve outside of Tuckerton is your headquarters for that. And that of course is a federal pot of money that runs through NOAA to the states to run the estuarine reserves. Okay, so that's the official news. Now for the unofficial news. I'm going to stop sharing, get off this screen, and okay, so not sharing anymore. So I'm going to tell you what the latest updates are. Okay, so from that $400 million, right, there's a notice of funding that's being prepared, a NOFO, if you will. It's out for Department of Commerce review, and it's now in the Office of Management Budget, OMB review, and that's where it sits. That's what we know. The Habitat Restoration and Resiliency Fund, $492 million, that will run right out of my office. That notice of funding opportunity has been written, is in Department of Commerce review. The tribal notice of funding opportunity, also another national pot of money, right? The 15% from the 400 million is under review. Comments are due from the management team, were due from the management team on April 22nd. And I don't have any more information for you folks who might be interested in the tribal fund. There is another planned, now again, these are all mixing up now. The dam removal one's just the 400 million, right? The second one I mentioned, the habitat resilience one, that's the 491 million. The tribal portion is 15% from the 400 million, which is the fish passage. And then I've got one more for you, which is that NOAA has decided to take a portion of the 491 million for the habitat resiliency and resilience fund and place that towards a national funding opportunity for underserved communities. Right? So it's going to be subdivided. So we are waiting for congressional approval of our spend plans. There is no timeline. And that's pretty much what I can tell you from the NOAA universe today.
Thank you very much, Carl. We appreciate that. We're going to take questions at the end. I did see one in the chat, but if you want to put other questions in the chat, we can save them to the end. Or Carl, if you want to go in and attempt that. Our next presenter is Eric Schrading. If you want to get ready to share your screen, Eric, he's with the New Jersey Field Office and Delaware Bay Coastal Program for U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and he'll talk to us about Department of Interior and U.S. Fish programs.
All right, let me share correctly again. Did it once. Just a second.
Take your time.
There we go. Okay. From the beginning. And I hit this thing. Nope.
Okay. Eric, you have the same situation where we're seeing the preview of the next slide.
Yes.
Okay. I didn't know if you were seeing that.
Working on resolving that, although I figure which button to hit. Nope, not that one.
Display settings at the top, Eric.
Display settings at the top. Looking for that. Sorry about this. I don't do Zoom that often.
Do you see display settings second from left at the very top of your screen?
How about that? Does that
There
work?
you go. Yep.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. I got it done. All right. So, so I'm going to talk to you about the Interior Department's bipartisan infrastructure law and funding that comes to the Interior Department as opposed to what comes to Department of Commerce, which is what Carl was just talking about. That's what I'll cover. I will try to that. There we go. Okay, so Department of Interior has a primary focus for BIL, or bipartisan infrastructure law, on climate crisis, legacy pollution, advancing environmental justice, boosting local economies, and our federal trust responsibilities to tribes. So just what I'm going to do is similar to what Carl just did, is just go over broad perspectives where there's a lot of money coming, and then kind of focus it down to where it's relevant to fish passage or dam removal projects. So there is a total of 1.4 billion in ecosystem restoration and resilience. That gets parsed out into about 400 million that's dedicated or going straight to states, tribes, and territories. There's about 100 million that's pulled away and put towards invasive species, primarily with Fish and Wildlife Service, but also includes other agencies like BLM and National Park Service. And then there's also about 16 billion that is going towards legacy pollution cleanup. And you would think that that might be a really good thing for what we have in New Jersey, because we have lots of legacy pollution cleanup needed in New Jersey, but most of that funding is going towards orphan wells and mines. Probably the nearest place where that would be applicable is West Virginia. There's quite a bit of work or funding that's probably going to go to West Virginia for that. So for Fish and Wildlife Service, there were 5 main pots of about 455 million that's going to these 5 main pots over 5 years. The ones highlighted are the ones probably most appropriate for New Jersey, but there is money going to Klamath Basin, there's money going to Lake Tahoe, and also money going to the Sage Steppe up in a bunch of western states, Colorado, Montana, Nebraska, not Nebraska, North Dakota. But for us in New Jersey, there's 2 main pots. There's about 26 million that's going towards the Delaware Basin, and there's 200 million that's going to the nationwide fish passage project. So those are what I will talk about with my remaining time, because that's most appropriate for us. So the Delaware River Basin restoration program is going to get about 26 million. This will be added to funds that they already have. So it's an add-on, it's not instead of. If they already had a fair amount of funding, it was up to somewhere around 10 million, $8 to $10 million per year. This should be additive. So if you take that 26 million and you split it up, it's about 5.2 million per year over the next 5 years. So again, because that's additive, you're really looking at about 15 million per year in that Delaware River Basin Restoration Program. That is primarily going, as Carl said, with some of the NOAA programs, to the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. It will go out as an RFP. It is dedicated to the Delaware Basin only, but that includes a number of states: New York, Delaware, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. There is a match, although my understanding is that they're looking at that and seeing if they can modify that so that it's not that required one-to-one match. But as of right now, as of what I understand, it's still this one-to-one match. Now, that funding is not exclusively for dam removal or aquatic connectivity projects. It can cover a whole variety of projects. So some examples are these kind of nature-based solutions, things that include wetland restoration, riparian buffers, upgrades to road stream crossings that can include benefits for aquatic passage. It can include living shoreline projects that include improve coastal resilience, forest restoration and management, and land protection. All those are in that pot. Again, there's an RFP, there's a review process with NIFWIF, and then those funds are passed out to grantees through that program. You may have heard about the Delaware the Delaware River Conservation Fund. That's the same thing. That's part of that same thing. The Delaware River Basin Restoration Program is part of that same thing. The other funds are about $200 million. It's going to go to the National Fish Passage Program. And again, that's kind of split out over 5 years. So it's $40 million per year that's going to be passed out. How that gets passed out is a little bit different. It's our program, I'm in ecological services, but we have a companion fish and aquatic conservation program that prioritizes fish passage projects. It updates those prioritized projects once a year, but they, kind of throughout the year always add new projects to it, reprioritize. But probably it'll be sometime in spring that they decide how those $40 million will be passed out to different projects. It's nationwide, so projects in Washington, Louisiana, everywhere else are all part of that same system. And typically those are funded through co-op agreements or contracts. But also can be, the co-op agreement would be, say, with an NGO or a partner. Contracts may be for directly paying for work on dam removal or aquatic connectivity projects. How you get on that prioritized list is talk to a local U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service field office, like ES, like ourselves. We would collect information about the project. We would supply it to our Fish and Aquatic Conservation Program. Costs that you have, what's needed, where it is, what species are going to be benefiting. We give them that. They create this database and then prioritize based on an internal review process. So those are the big ones that are relevant to aquatic connectivity. I'm happy to answer any questions about those as we go along after maybe the presentations are over. But I'll also say that my understanding is that those monies are out there right now. The FY22, those funds were already provided to NIFWF for their FY22 RFP, which is already closed. I think they're going to do their review on that sometime May to July and then make a decision about funds. So my information is that all this bipartisan infrastructure funding is already in these systems and will be, eventually sent out to for 2 projects in later this year. And again, it's 5 years. There's 5 years of money. So I would encourage folks to either apply for projects through NIFWF, through that Delaware River Basin, or contact your local Fish and Wildlife Service office if you have a project. A number of the ones we already have in New Jersey that we're familiar with, that we know are out there, we've already put in the system in the National Fish Passage program. So hopefully they're in there, whether they get prioritized above, something that, a salmon project in Oregon or California, I don't know, but at least we'll get them in the system. And, with that, I will stop sharing, hopefully.
Thanks very much, Eric. And we'll introduce our next and last speaker. It's Valerie Whalen, from biologist and project manager from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Philadelphia District. And I think that you're not joined by Jake, but I'll let you add in, Jake, if you're there or not. I'm just about to share. Give me a second here.
I think I think Jake is here. He's the hydrologist and hydraulic engineer.
Okay, so. Okay, I think everyone is seeing this.
Okay, so we don't, as Beth mentioned, we don't have a lot of information on or implementation guidance on the Infrastructure Jobs Act. So I'm just going to focus on the Section 206 authority continuing. I apologize because just when I'm ready to talk, they're outside mowing the lawns. So of course that's always what happens. But so I'm going to focus on the Continuing Authorities Program, Section 206, which authorizes dam removal projects. If you wanted to, if you were interested in a dam removal project, you would have to coordinate with your local Corps district. I know that there's other, it looks like there's some other folks on the line that aren't from New Jersey, but specifically in New Jersey, there's 2 districts. The Philadelphia district covers the Delaware watershed and the Manasquan River and south along the Jersey shore. And then the rest of New Jersey is covered by New York district. And then, as I mentioned, dam removals are covered under the Continuing Authorities Program under Section 206. They could also be covered under the General Investigation or GI program, which is a much larger study that specifically, the study needs to be specifically authorized by Congress. And then we also have, the Corps also has a technical assistance program called Planning Assistance to the States that does not authorize detailed plans, designs, or construction, but is just technical assistance. And you could also get some help on dam removals under that authority. But we're going to focus on Section 206 under the Continuing Authorities Program. Okay, next slide. So Section 206 provides for restoration of degraded aquatic habitat. The study is funded initially $100,000. That's 100% federal, and then and usually that would cover what's called the federal interest determination, which I'll describe to you, and then also the development of a project management plan, and if it's determined that it's in the federal interest to conduct the dam removal or study the dam removal further than the next $50,000 would be used for probably the development of a project management plan and execution of a feasibility cost sharing agreement. Then any amount for the feasibility study over that initial $100,000 would be shared 50-50, federal and non-federal. And then for construction, the cost sharing is 65% federal, 35% non-federal, with a maximum federal cost of $10 million. And operation and maintenance costs are 100% non-federal. All right, next slide. So this graphic on the right is a life cycle of a core project. It starts with a potential sponsor would send a letter of interest or letter of intent to their local core district. And that is followed by the federal interest determination, where the Corps determines whether or not it's in the federal interest to proceed with a feasibility study. But I'll start with what I think we're most interested in. I'll go through this and then come back to the top rung, because I think that's what this group might be most interested in. So then after we determine that there's a federal interest, the non-federal sponsor would sign a feasibility cost sharing agreement, or we'd execute a feasibility cost sharing agreement with the Corps and the non-federal sponsor. And that would only be if the feasibility study would be over that initial $100,000. And then if the study is, if it's determined feasible and the study is approved, then the sponsor would sign a project partnership agreement with the Corps, and that's to complete the design. So I think we get to maybe 30% design in the feasibility study, and then all the way to the final design under the project partnership agreement during the design and construction phase. And then once construction, or in this case, deconstruction, is complete, then the operation and maintenance would begin, and that's 100% federal. There might be some monitoring and adaptive management that is cost shared at the same cost share as the authority, and that's that for construction and that final design and implementation. That's the 65-35. And so then going back up to the top rung, if you are interested in a dam removal, interested in partnering with the Corps on a dam removal project, you'd start by the non-federal sponsor would start by sending a letter of interest to the local Corps district. Then we would have to go and conduct a site visit and add it to a CAP database, and we would rank it under section 206, so other dam removal or restoration projects. After we rank it, we're again, like a prioritization, then we would send it up to our division who also ranks it. And then they would send it to headquarters who would determine which projects would be funded. If it's determined that it would be funded, it would be considered a new start study. That's when we would conduct the federal interest determination. So that is the second light blue step. And I just wanted to make sure you understood that this process between the first two steps can be lengthy, and it could take up to 2 years or possibly longer. So it's important to get the letter of interest in early, or like start conversations with the Corps early. And there's no guarantee on funding. It's a letter of interest, and the section 206 authority is very competitive for funding. Okay, next slide. And there's this document that, or booklet, it's called Partnering with the Corps. And it's a really good document. And here's the website that you can download it. You might find that helpful. And I forgot to send them to Beth, but I also have 2 brochures that I can send to Beth on the Continuing Authorities Program, which also covers, and this has some detail on all of those programs that I mentioned, not just the Continuing Authorities Program. And that's it.
Okay, I'll stop sharing. Thank you very much, Valerie. Just, I guess that, lesson learned here is if you have something of interest, so the funding from the Corps will come through the 206 program, which Valerie just did a great job of outlining for us. It's not yet, like NOAA, they're waiting for the final details to shake out. But I would say that now would be the time to reach out if you think that you might want to work with the Corps. I think sooner is better. Don't wait until these programs are all ironed out. And I would say that for each of the presenters, it's always best to reach out and have an informal conversation. It is not a good idea to spend 100 hours on a grant application and find out that there's no way your project would be funded. Or, better yet, find out that's exactly what we're looking for and invest those 100 hours. Just an informal conversation, I don't think anyone objects to ever, at least in my experience. Are there still unanswered questions in the chat? I see that speakers have been answering them. Or does anybody want to just unmute themselves and ask a question now? I think we can manage that. If you want to raise your hand, if we have more than one question, we can go through them that way. I'll try to on a bunch of pages here. Okay, anybody want to raise their hand and ask a question live, or? Okay, not seeing that. Okay, so I do have a question actually for Eric. When you mentioned the fish passage program, is it being increased by 40 million or to 40 million, or what is it at now? Because that's something pretty popular amongst dam removers.
Oh, that's a great question, and I don't know the answer to it.
Okay.
It is something, and it is additive. 40 million is additive, but I don't know where it is right now. So I can find out and get back to you.
Okay, no problem. Jeff Gold, I see your hand is up. You can unmute.
Yes, thanks for these presentations. They were great. I know the funding kind of in reviewing the bill is kind of coming from all over the place. And I'm wondering, I know historically, especially the federal agencies and the state agencies have sort of gotten together to, when a project comes up to kind of coordinate and, add on their different funding mechanisms. Is there an opportunity? Would you guys be the ones to reach out to Carl and Eric and in the Army Corps?
For U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, yes. We don't control the National Fish Passage funding, but the river coordinator for Susquehanna and Delaware would be the one that covers that, but we can be a conduit to make that connection. Now, there's money that's going specifically to states, tribes, and territories. That's 400 million. I'm not sure who in the state. I'm assuming it goes to DEP in terms of spending those funds on ecosystem restoration and resilience. But it might be useful for us collaboratively as this group to get a presentation maybe from the state, talk about what their process is in terms of spending bipartisan infrastructure funding. I actually don't know, but I think there are opportunities where these funds can be put together on one project. In other words, some of this BIL funds from the state, some BIL funds that's given to Fish and Wildlife Service, possibly the same thing with NOAA, and all those things could be combined onto one project. So unless there's a match requirement in terms of federal versus non-federal, but it might be an opportunity.
Yeah, as far as I know, and the difference here between Eric's office and mine is that Fish and Wildlife operates on a state-by-state basis, and NOAA is somewhat segregated by region, and all of our offerings are national. So there's no, as I answered in the chat box before, there's no specific amount to each coastal state with NOAA. It's one big pot, and everybody gets a grab at it across the entire nation, all 32 coastal states and also territories. So Guam, Puerto Rico, they're in the mix as well. But if you do have a project, and Jeff, I'm sure you're going to have a project, no doubt about it, in New Jersey, I would be the person that you would speak to about the NOAA grants, not only in New Jersey, but in Pennsylvania, Delaware, and New York. So I'm basically covering that region. Now, that we have a kind of a loose system for which regional coordinator to go to. So for instance, if you were interested in something that was in the lower portion of Delaware and Maryland and parts of PA, like the Susquehanna, you'd probably go to Mary Andrews in the Annapolis office or Rich Takis there. Whereas I would probably be your best bet to go to the Delaware Basin, the Hudson Valley, and Long Island, and all of New Jersey for questions about projects. So it's basically, we kind of divvy it up by watershed, if you will. So that's a very different approach.
Okay. Thanks, Carl. I did notice that we have some folks on from the DEP, wondering if any of them have anything to offer, any kind of hints or clues about how money from New Jersey will be added to this. And if you want to raise your hand or just unmute yourself, there's not that many of you that you'd be speaking on top of one another. If you don't know, you can just stick that in the chat. And I see Eric is asking what would make for a good competitive project for these sources. Eric, you want to speak for Fish and Wildlife, and then Valerie, and then Carl? We can. What are some buttons that folks should hit?
Yeah, well, so for the National Fish Passage program funds, those would be, first order blockages, ones that are primarily for migratory fish. For us, that's alewife, blueback herring, shad, American eel. So those first order blockages, ones that hit migratory fish for us, ones that have a variety of partners. And generally speaking, they're kind of targeting, if it's construction ready, shovel ready, those would be all good competitive ones. For the Delaware River Basin projects, that runs the gamut from, same criteria, I would say, for dam removals, but there's other parts of that that could incorporate coastal resilience, living shoreline, things like that, that might be competitive as well. Carl?
Yeah, well, very similar. If you think about it, right? NOAA being all in on providing for the historic runs of migratory, sea-run migratory fish. Anything that would include your highly migratory species that invade the freshwater river systems of the United States is going to be competitive. But primarily, if you can show that you're removing a blockage that's going to dramatically increase the stream miles in a river system, that shad, river herring, eel, lamprey, even white perch and striped bass, which are also migratory species. If you can improve the number of stream miles, that's a major metric for us, right? So if you're taking a dam out that's the 7th in a row of 10 dams, and you've got 6 other ones below that are blocking passage to migratories, that's probably not going to do as well, because at this moment, removing that will possibly improve water quality in the system and improve the river run for resident species. It may not do anything at this moment for the migratories. So in general, if you're gonna apply to NOAA, you want to hit those downstream dams that are likely to gain you passage immediately. Now it's different with American eel, because American eel managed somehow to slip their way around many of the lower dams. But as eel go up the system, the more dams they have to slip around, right? And slide through the grass and around the dam. The less number of eel and of different size classes can get up that stream. So it becomes more difficult to make a case for American eel if you're going for those upstream dams.
And
So the other things that Eric pointed out, construction ready. If you got a permit in hand, that's fantastic. You got match money. If you've done a significant amount of homework on the project already, if you're already deep in feasibility studies towards the completion of the design, or if you're partially phased through the design, those are all competitive advantages for certain. And
Thanks.
so Beth, back to you.
I'm going to ask Valerie to answer that, but before I forget, I'm going to remind folks that there are some tools out there that can help you in decision making. One is you can Google the Northeast Connectivity Tool, and that will help you to figure out exactly where your dam is in line in the priority. Is it the first blockage? Is it the second, the third? What will it mean to the river when you take that out? And so we will plan an information session on that tool. And then also the conservation blueprint now overlays the dams in the conservation mapping. And then there's another layer for the state's underserved communities map. So that is a fantastic way to say, I'm working on a dam in an underserved community that is, a high priority for connectivity. So try to pull together as many interesting things about your project as you can. So Valerie, you want to just take a shot at what makes a great project for the Corps?
I wouldn't have much to add to what the others have said. Most beneficial and the most downstream blockage. Well, in a nutshell.
Hey, Beth, I might add to think about reaching out to federally recognized or even state recognized tribes as a partner. There's a strong emphasis that you heard from Carl, and certainly with our funding as well, in terms of having that partnership and working on our federal trust responsibilities with tribes. So even if it's partnering, technical assistance, that might be worthwhile to pursue for a project, because I think that would certainly give it some bonus points if that was part of the partnership effort.
So would the tribe need to be a property owner or just a partner?
No, they could just be a partner in terms of technical assistance, and actually part of the justification could tie into tribal importance, tribal identification of the site, as well as the importance of that site for the tribe itself. So it could be just technical assistance, but it might be worthwhile to pursue that as a partnership, which we haven't traditionally done. Oftentimes our connection with the tribe is really through the Historic Preservation Act, in terms of making sure that they're aware of the project and have given us kind of the green light for a project. But they, by all means, could be a legitimate partner in some of the projects.
Okay, and I see Alan asked the question, which of these funding sources would require the state to be project applicant? I know that's a FEMA, that would be a FEMA requirement, but I don't know if the state needs to be an applicant on any of the programs discussed, or can NGOs be the applicant on your projects?
It's not required for any of our projects.
Right, and the same here at NOAA. Yes, the state does not have to be an applicant.
And same here, the state can, Jake answered it in the chat, but the state can partner. USACE can partner with the state, local governments and NGOs.
Okay, I see a note in there about what the state of New Jersey finds as its priorities in looking at dam removals. So Jeff is asking about technical assistance from the Corps. Is that available? I'm guessing the end of that question is outside of a program. Is that what you mean, Jeff?
I was just wondering if they might get funded to do that. I know they have to be they have to obviously have specific funds to do different types of work. And I've talked to various contacts that potentially could provide like technical assistance, like sediment modeling and that kind of thing.
Yeah, there's a program that I mentioned earlier, planning assistance to the states, and that can also, the non-federal sponsor can be any of those three groups. It doesn't have to be a state. And I think we have a broader brush there with providing technical assistance, with the only caveat that it won't end up in, you won't get a design and it won't end up in construction with the Corps, but it would just be purely technical assistance. Jake, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I was going to say the same thing.
Okay, it looks like we're at time. I'm going to just add something that Michelle's put in the chat early on. In case you missed it, I referenced njdams.org as a great reference, not only for you guys, but if you want to refer property owners, mayors, other concerned citizens, whatever, they get a ton of information on njdams.org. But we also have a YouTube channel, Statewide Dam Removal Partnership, and you can find all of the webinars there as well. So you can just go to the YouTube channel as well. Okay, I'm willing to hang out for another 5 minutes if folks have questions. I don't see any hands raised, and I don't see.
Hi, Beth. Yeah, before any hands raised, I'll just say that a couple of things that our national funding opportunity for fish passage is for fish passage. Dam removal, of course, is a fast fish passage technique, but technically, I think you could apply for alternatives such as, nature like fishways, right? That would include rock ramps, bypass channels, and fish ladders. Those may not be as competitive, but there are cases where it's not possible for various reasons, whether the dam owners are unwilling or there are technical issues, there are water supply issues, there's reasons for the dam being in place where it's just not possible to remove a dam. So I don't want to give the impression that we wouldn't consider those options as well. And the last thing I wanted to say was that, yeah, we've got regional staff around. Again, if you know Rich Takis out of the Annapolis office, or if you've worked with Mary Andrews in the past, feel free to contact them as well as myself. It's like I said, it's difficult to say exactly where one region ends and the other begins, but it's fair to say if you have, especially if you already have relationships with those other folks, Jim Turek up out of Narragansett as well, who covers parts of New York. Mary covers parts of New York, New Jersey, probably, yeah, New York as well, the Susquehanna watershed, parts of the Delaware. So there are multiple people you can come to for questions and answers.
Okay, last call. Any questions? I will remind you that if you know folks who weren't able to join, they can, find the recording on either YouTube channel or njdams.org. But thank you all for coming out, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.